Welcome to the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast. This is a show about pushing through obstacles and hard times in order to live a happy and fulfilled life. I'm your host, Ted Phaeton, and it's a pleasure to have you joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's grow. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the No Rain, No Rainbows podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. And as always, big shout out to my executive producer, Andre Subtle Solution Media, helping to make this podcast possible. I'm excited to introduce our guest for today. Please help me welcome author, speaker, executive coach, Robert White here, I believe domestically now, correct?
I have returned from China. I am learning to be an American again.
Absolutely. And I love that, you're taking the time to be on the podcast with us today, and even more so sharing some of your insights. We want to talk about living an extraordinary life. But before we hop into the subject matter, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience. I know they've already gotten a glimpse that you're back here in the States, but maybe give them a little insight as to where you were for so long.
Well, I have lived abroad most of my working life, or more than 50%, I suppose. And but I've been in the business of creating and running high impact experiential learning companies. So with a 1,300,000 graduates from those two companies that I founded and led. So part of me is a businessman. I love putting people in those seats, exposing them to our work. Yeah. And part of me is that in order to do that, I had to learn how to be in front of the room and lead these experiential learning events. So it's kind of like two different skill sets, but ones that over the years I've become fairly good at. And that did take me originally to Japan. Then I came back to the US for a while because of family, and also kind of semi-retired at 46. And then all of that blew up in my life, and I went back to work. And so that's the current coat that I wear, which is to work intensely with people, either in a group coaching environment or one-on-one. And of course, writing and speaking kind of are part of that. I did go back to China 6 years ago. And so that's been an incredible experience until they kind of threw me out. And so I love working with people. I love seeing them win. Yeah. And, that's kind of the theme of the book and the theme of my life in many, many ways. I always was more comfortable being in the back of the room when we were building those companies. The latest one, ARC International, had 240 people. We had 70 trainers. And I've always said that 1/3 of them were better than me. Like, really, I'm not being falsely humble here. Mm-hmm. They were doing it all the time. They were gifted. They worked at their craft. They were fantastic. 1/3 were rookies. They're on their way up. They're working full time. They're doing trainings, but they're still a work in progress. And 1/3 are in the middle. And that was me. I'm pretty good, but I'm not as good as that top 1/3. Mm-hmm. And working with those people and contributing to them, I got more value from that than from actually being in front of the room. And I worked my way to the point where I only did 1 5-day training per year. Because if you've got 240 people, they keep you pretty busy. Yeah. Especially because our industry attracts egos that are about the size of Mount Fuji.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So it's like herding cats, as somebody said, and I think that's mostly true. But they're the most incredible people, the most interesting people, because they're interacting with thousands of people. They're learning from them, and just having a beer with them is fascinating. So I enjoyed most of my time with them. Not 100%. But,
yeah, which is still good to say for the most part. I want to ask, because I love that when I was unpacking your journey, and a lot of the coaching you do focusing on living an extraordinary life, and I know a lot of the listeners, they have the ambition and the goal to live an extraordinary life themselves. obviously a lot of times we learn from the examples in front of us. I'd love to hear the story, how you went from, you mentioned in your bio, poor kid from Green Bay, Wisconsin, who one semester in college manages to retire at age 46. I have on my vision board I want to retire at age 45. So
Very good.
I'm hoping to take some notes from you and find out how you did it, and how maybe some of the listeners and watchers can replicate that.
Well, it takes ultimately a commitment. Ted, I offer a free 28-page document about success on my website, and what it includes are these 8 principles that we figured out, and all 8 of them are really common. I mean, you will know every one of them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I say when I present them is that number 8 is commitment. And ultimately, that's the only one you really need. If you're really committed to something, anything, you're gonna figure out how to do it. You're gonna figure out that, yes, I need to express myself. That's one of them. You have to be clear about what you're doing. That's one of them. You have to be honest. That's one of them. You have to play win-win. That's one of them. But you'll figure all of that out if you're really, truly committed to that which you say you want to create. Obviously, it's almost embarrassing. I mean, I had a 15,000 square foot house. I had 5 vehicles. I had a jet, my own airplane. I skied 80 days a year. I mean, life was really, really good. Now I screwed all that up, but I did create it from zero. And the key to it was to be passionate about the work we were doing, to be committed to it, and then to say, well, if I'm committed to this, then more people should participate. And that's going to take me attracting other people to work in my company that share the dream. And I think there's like step 1, becoming kind of good at your profession, at whatever it is you do. And you can do that alone. But ultimately, you're going to have to attract other people into the game. You're going to have to find people that resonate with you and want to do what you want to do and want to do it with you. And it took me a while to kind of figure that out. I struggled a lot. I failed a lot. I went to one of the early human potential movement trainings because of that. I was struggling. I had had an early divorce. I felt really guilty about it. I felt like I had done a really bad thing. I had a fairly severe health problem, and with chest pain every day. I'd had 3 heart attacks, and my business was failing. I was late on payroll, and a friend saw all of that. And of course, I'm trying to act like everything's together, right?
Yeah.
I'm cool. And but a dear friend, saw through that act and persuaded me to go to this training. And it's a cliche all these years later, but it changed my life because I got it. I got that I am responsible for my life. It isn't the economy. It isn't my wife or husband. It isn't any kind of circumstance in my life. It's me. Mm-hmm. I own it. Not from a standpoint of blame and shame and regret. I just own it.
Yeah,
it's mine. And what's next? It's my choice. I better make better choices in the future. That kind of thing. I got so much value from that training that I ended up running that company for someone else. So for 4 years, I ran someone else's business, which allowed me to learn the training business. I didn't know anything about it before that. Mm-hmm. And so I got paid a salary for learning. Good deal, you know. And when I went out on my own, I still made a ton of mistakes. But I think those early experiences prepared me for the life that I eventually created.
Yeah, which I think it's amazing because I love how transparent you are in the fact of, hey, I created it and then it went away, which I think a lot of us listening, myself included, I don't take failure well. And a lot of us have a hard time rebounding from that. And especially when we reach a level of success. And I think a lot of us have that whole bravado. Everything's okay. Everything's all right. But, maybe someone that's listening is having mounting credit card debt, or their company is on the verge of failing. They don't know how they're going to support the next month's worth of expenses. How do you bounce back from that? How do you kind of pick up those tools and then start building again? What I guess first, what gives you that motivation to do so? And then secondly, I guess what were some of the fundamentals you used to kind of climb out of that?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of trapped because I wrote a book on personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Anytime I fall into that victim role, somebody will remind me. When I was living in Aspen, I'm living the good life. I traveled to 40 countries. I was on 6 nonprofit boards. I spent 6 months traveling with the late John Denver, presenting an environmental seminar. I've met 3 American presidents. I've met 2 kings and an emperor. I've had this incredible life that I never imagined, never, growing up in Green Bay. And in doing that, I lost touch with my business. And then suddenly, and in the same 3-month period, the woman that I'd fallen in love with left me for a lawyer. And by the way, if you're going to break up, just hope that the woman in your life does not leave you for a lawyer.
Stacks the odds against you.
But I did have this friendship with John Denver, and he got off the road one day. Oh, we went through divorce together. Our wives were best friends, and they left us within the same 7-day period.
Oh, wow.
And neither of us wanted that. That was not our choice.
Yeah.
We both created it, but we didn't want it. And that's that accountability piece creeping in there, you know. But John got off the road, and we had just been attacked on the front page of the Aspen Times, the newspaper that everybody in Aspen reads, as having sexually molested our daughters. It was the latest divorce tactic, I guess, but a pretty savage one for a man. I mean, and we're both, and that's something you don't want to share with somebody, John and I being on the front page of the newspaper. And we went down valley from Aspen's a little town called Glenwood Springs, so named because they have a hot springs. And next to the hot springs pool are the vapor caves. So you go down there, you sit in the steam for an hour or so and cook and talk. And then you go take a shower and have a macrobiotic lunch, and then back to the heat. And then you have a massage. It's a day-long deal.
Yeah.
Very nice. And you talk a lot. So John and I played victim for about an hour, about the first hour of that. And then we just started laughing, because we realized that what we were doing, we're externalizing the issue. We're blaming our soon-to-be ex-wives, right? And then we really got into how we created it. And then we made a couple of promises to each other. And one of the promises was that we would be rigorously honest with each other. So there's a guy in the training business that I honor and respect a lot named Werner Erhard. He's an older guy now. He's in his mid-80s, I think, still speaking occasionally. But he created a company called Est, and that became a company called Landmark. They've got over 6 million graduates around the world. Incredible material. But Werner said that one time to me, that he's not a guy in a diner, about a subject we were talking about. I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That guy, it's late night, you've been out drinking, you go to the diner to have a snack before you go home, and you sit next to a guy at the counter and he knows everything about everything."
Mm-hmm.
You know that guy?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about politics, he knows everything. Talk about sports, he's got statistics down pat. And the truth is, he's a mile wide and an inch deep. He knows a little bit about everything. And what I realized is that there are so many things I don't know anything about, but I know something about the human condition, and I better start with me.
Yeah.
And, that I'm the center of all of this. It's me. Mm-hmm. And if this marriage didn't work, or if this business didn't work, the first person to look at is me. One of those old motivational speakers, and I'm not a big fan of motivational speakers in a way, but this guy said something that I really got it. And I'm glad we're on Zoom, because he said that every time you point, just remember there are 4 fingers pointed back at you.
Yeah.
That's not a bad little piece to live by. Start with you. Sure, people do betray you. The bank doesn't come through. The client switches suppliers. All of the stuff that happens, particularly in business or personally. Sometimes people don't like your act and walk away from you.
Yeah.
The good place to start is looking at yourself and how you are cause in the matter. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, you stay in this loop of being the victim. Mm-hmm. And it's a down spiral.
Yeah. And
emotionally and physically.
That's so powerful, because I think so many people are afraid to look in the mirror and take that responsibility. And I say responsibility because there's a difference between blame and responsibility.
Oh, wow.
If something happens to you, sure, it might not be your fault, but it's your responsibility where you go from here. And I think the empowering thing about that, when you say, okay, hey, it's me. Listen, if you're the problem, then quite frankly, you're also the solution. And that's where the empowering part comes from. So I'd love to know what the building blocks looked like and how that started to play out in the years following the divorce and everything kind of altering. When did things kind of really start altering for you and it kind of click in your head and you're saying, oh, I'm turning this thing around?
I've been asked recently to speak to a lot of young people about entrepreneurship. And so I realized that a lot of what I learned about it was from my failures. I mean, I have had a lot of success, and I need to own up to that also and be responsible for that. But I fired 240 people. I closed 15 offices. I lost $30 million. I mean, if I don't learn something from that, from the pain that comes with that, then I'm really a fool. So I've really been looking at kind of a structure for fulfillment, for getting what you want. And it seems to me that it begins with knowing a whole lot more about you, first of all. And then there's these 3 steps. It's mirrored in our coaching, mirrored in our trainings. First is to clear your past, to be comfortable with it, and to some degree to let it go. That doesn't change that it happened, but you can change how you react to it. So some things that you need to let go of before you enter a business is any, on a personal level, is any blame, shame, regret, guilt, or even past success. Because we build up this belief structure around that and operate from that. And that's like a killer to a new business or a new relationship or a new anything. So step 1 is clear the past. Take some of the negative energy off of it. The second piece is to learn to get better at telling the truth about your current reality. I mean, the number of people that I've talked with that are interested in starting a business who are in some kind of fairy tale land about where they are right then, you got to deal with that first. The Buddhists call it developing a selfless regard for reality. In other words, getting your ego out of the way so you can just see what's real about you, about the market, about other people. And then if you've done those 2 things, then there's that piece that you mentioned earlier about the vision board, that have a compelling vision, not just a vision, but a compelling vision. One that, and by compelling, I mean one that attracts other people, not just you. Any vision can motivate you. I might have a vision of being a shooting guard in the NBA. It's not really a vision. It's a fantasy. Yeah. I'm short, I'm overweight, I'm slow. Did I miss anything here?
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. But so a lot of people are like that, though. They have a kind of an imagination, an image, and they would rather protect that image than tell the truth about where they are. And then, because if you do those 2 things, clear your past, tell the truth about where you are, and then have a vision that attracts other people, that's pretty good building blocks for the future. The business part of me says, that's kind of the personal growth side of me. The business side of me is, do you have a game? And games have, I like the metaphor, because games have a very specific purpose, which is to win. All games have a purpose of winning, and they have a set of rules, and they have a structure. There's a strategy. There are tactics to win. You know, the Air Force is now giving you extra points. You want to be a pilot? You want to fly an F-16?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but right now in your application, you get extra points if you've been a gamer.
I had no idea.
Yeah, because what do you have to do to win as a gamer? You have to know the strategy, the tactics, and have the reflexes, the eye-hand coordination. That's a jet pilot. You know, it's amazing. But you've got to have a game, and the game has got to be winnable. You know, and you've got to know what the rules of the game are, and you've got to know what the strategy and the tactics are, and be really rigorous about that.
Yeah.
After that, there's all kinds of variables, but I think it's a good start. Is take a look at you. If there's some needed personal development work, do it. Read that book. Go see that coach. Plug yourself into something. And get that kind of support. And then, and by the way, when you go looking for support, talk to people that have been there and done that. Not your cousin because he's got an opinion about everything. You know, that go find somebody that's actually done what you want them to do. In my group coaching work, that's the most common feedback that I get is, Robert, I did this program, I read this book, I got into this, you know, nothing worked for me, and this works for me because you've done it. And so even my failures have turned out to be a tremendous source of learning and growth and stuff that I can share with people.
Yeah.
But if you've done those first two, then you develop a compelling vision for yourself and for the people in your life. That attracts them, that brings them in with you. That's the beginning of a good business. And you got to have a game.
Yeah, got to have a game. I love that because you mentioned the learning piece. And even earlier, you said how when it came to the coaching business, you ran the business for someone else for years before doing it yourself.
Yes.
I think there's so many of us who, and maybe ego's a part of it, we want to start our thing. And we want to start our company and be at the helm and be at the front of the room, as you mentioned, you know, starting out in the back of the room and learning more from the back of the room than the front. There's so many people who want to start off as the leader when they might not have learned the lessons yet. How important is it for us to kind of, I guess, learn before we kind of jump ahead of the game, or some, I guess, experiential learning along the way that can kind of help us for success down the line?
That's a really great question. And I hope people really tuned into it. You know, I'm in a place in life where people come to me for money, for their business. And one of the things that I sort for is, have they had comparable experience? Have they done something? I mean, not the same thing. I mean, they wouldn't be coming to me for money if they were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But did they learn something from early experiences? You know, I had the experience of a heart attack at 19, which dropped me out of college.
Wow.
And then I couldn't find a job. Oh, the Air Force wouldn't take me, by the way, speaking of jet pilots, and because of my health. And so I got that job at a finance company. And I was there for 7 years and did really well there. And started a part-time business while I was there, by the way. I had the security of the salary, right?
Yeah.
And I'm working nights and weekends on the new business. But I for a number of years, I kind of dismissed that experience. And then several things happened where it woke me up to where I realized how much I had learned there about people, about myself, about systems, something I'd never been good at in my life. You know, at that time in a finance company, the only computers were in the home office, you know, some huge IBM monster, you know. In the actual branch office that I managed, no computers. I mean, we had adding machines and paper cards that you kept records on.
Yeah.
Years later, in selling my product, I started realizing I need to have those paper cards. I need to keep notes on people and follow up with them. All those things I learned in a finance company. But I also learned about people and budgets and how people get in trouble financially, how I get in trouble financially. I learned so much. So I think every experience we have, there's potential learning in it if we're willing to be aware, if we're willing to wake up. And if something has absolutely no value, you can always find some. We did that. I mentioned I did that 1 5-day training a year. One of our handouts was called, and we gave it to people overnight, asked them to read it, come in the next morning and talk about it. It was called The Dancing Toll Taker. And at that time, I lived in Marin County, north of San Francisco, and it's connected, of course, by the Golden Gate Bridge. So the story kind of had more meaning to me. And so this guy was a toll taker, $2, $2, change, good morning. Sounds like a terrible job, right? This guy's dream was to be a dancer, to be on stage. So he went to his boss and he said, could I put a little radio in my booth? And the boss said, yeah, go ahead. He didn't care. So the guy put the radio in his booth and he started practicing dancing in a toll booth.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, people coming from Marin into San Francisco to work in the morning chose his booth and had to wait in line longer because can you imagine how lit up he was dancing at his toll booth versus all the other people that are bored out of their minds and wish they were somewhere else?
Yeah.
So even a job that looks really routine, you can find something about it that is moving you toward your goals, moving you toward what you want to create in your life and lights you up. That former wife that wasn't very kind to me during the divorce, we've become pretty good co-parents, and she stepped into that commitment that I made. So I want to acknowledge her for that. She's also one of the funniest, wittiest, wisest people I know. And she often talks about what is it that lights you up? Go find that.
Yeah.
Go find that thing you would do it for no money. Just don't tell anybody you would do it for no money.
That's the caveat.
I mean, I can't tell you how much satisfaction I get in these group coaching sessions. I mean, I learn from people. I laugh more. It lights me up. I want to do it tomorrow. Yeah. And so I think that's, in terms of summarizing kind of a place to be, is have you found a way to have what you're doing with 1/3 of your life, your work life, that lights you up?
Yeah. And I think that's so important when we talk about living an extraordinary life. It's finding that core of what lights you up and then unapologetically being in pursuit of that and leaning into it.
Yeah. And be willing to take some disapproval from friends and family who don't get you and don't get what you're up to. And because a lot of people are pretty negatively based and they somehow makes them feel better to put you down. Yeah. I mean, that's just a reality that's been true for thousands of years. Read the Bible. People did it. People did it to Jesus, and if you come up with a new idea and walk away from security, especially, you're going to catch some heat. Yeah. I had this sales business that after I went through that human potential movement training, I tripled it in the year after the training. Nice. And in the following year, it went up 10 times. And so I had this month where I made more money in 1 month than I had ever made in a year. And I knew the money was coming. And in those days, it was paper checks, in a special envelope. So I came into the office one Monday morning, and my secretary had this big smile on her face, and she hands me the mail, and she says, the checks are here. And there was a letter from my mom. And this is the days when, moms wrote, and I wrote, handwritten letters to family members. Mm-hmm. So I went into my office. Guess what I opened first? Not the letter from mom, right?
The checks, huh?
3 envelopes totaling $25,000. And I got my little team together, and we opened some cheap champagne and toasted to our success and gave everybody hugs. And I went back to my office. And I opened this letter from mom, and I can see it. I can see it in my mind's eye right now. All those years ago, it was the weather, how she's feeling, how my brother and sisters are doing. That's page 1.
Yeah.
Top of page 2. Have you found a good job yet? You know, my mom was a depression mom. She lived through soup lines and real poverty.
Yeah.
And she never owned a home frankly, until I bought her one. In her lifetime, she never owned a home.
Yeah.
And so for her, the way you survive the depression is get a job in a big company.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm doing what I love, I'm making a ton of money for me. Have you found a good job yet? You know, I've still got the taste of the bad champagne in my mouth, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
reading this letter. But that's true for so many people.
Yeah.
They don't get supported by the people that they love and that they want approval from. You know, you've got to be willing to stand in that space of no approval.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write that down. And Robert, I know you coach so many people, you help so many people in terms of breaking through some of their own limitations, living an extraordinary life. I'd love to make sure that our listeners, our watchers, have an opportunity to connect with you and follow some of your material, even the 28-page document that you mentioned earlier. So, what are some links or resources folks can find on how they can get there?
If they go to extraordinarypeople.com, they can sign up for my weekly e-zine. It's called An Extraordinary Minute with Robert White. And it's usually a quote from somebody and then a few comments from me. It's all designed to be read in 1 minute or less. It's designed for today's attention span. And included in that is this 28-page PDF about living an extraordinary life. It's what we've learned with working with over 1 million people. That's one way. Another way, and that's a way just for us to get connected. You know, and you kind of figure out how I think, and hopefully you hit reply from now, you know, from occasionally, so that I get to know you and what are the issues in your life. The other way is I have a different website called therobertwhite.com. And on it talks about my group coaching work. And so you can learn about it. And I also offer a 30-minute free coaching session on an issue of your choice. And the link to that is on that, therobertwhite.com.
Excellent.
Easy to remember.
Absolutely.
So,
and I'll also have those links in the show notes too. So if folks for some reason missed it, maybe they got a call while listening to this podcast, or the dog's barking, or they had to go grab the kids, they can simply hit the link in the show notes and get straight to it. But Robert, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your story and being vulnerable, transparent, and just pouring some of your expertise into us, because I know a lot of our listeners and our watchers really got a lot of value from that.
Ted, I love what you're doing. I think it's a real service to a lot of people. And if I can support you in any way, let me know.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, Robert. And I'm going to recap some of the gems that you mentioned along the way as we kind of sign off here on the episode, because there were a number of things that you said that I really think the listeners need to hear one more time as we're leaving this podcast. First, it takes commitment. A lot of us have this life that we want to live, this dream, or we want to get to that next level, live an extraordinary life. But we first have to decide that we are committed to it. Two, it's me. You have to start with you. And I don't mean that in an attacking way. I mean that in an empowering way, by taking responsibility and understanding that you are the reason for your current situation. You also give yourself power to get out of that situation and craft the life that you desire. And of course, don't discredit what you've learned. A lot of us are either working a 9 to 5, or we have been stuck in a job before that might not have been the ideal job that we wanted, but the dots usually connect in hindsight. So I urge you folks to kind of look back and find the lessons in that job. Find the nuggets that you learned that you can apply now. I believe it was Steve Jobs who didn't know the interest of the importance of fonts that he learned in college until he needed to apply it to his company. And
Perfect.
You have to be willing to stand in an area of disapproval. So many of us needed to hear that, because when we start living the extraordinary life, we often hear from those closest to us some of the negativity, some of the fear, the limiting beliefs, and really the inertia and the friction comes from those closest to us. But it's just wind in your wings as you're getting ready to take off. And trust me that the air is so much more what's the word I'm looking for? I guess easy to
Smooth.
fly through, smoother. Yeah. It's smoother up in the air than it is
Up
down near the
there.
ground where a lot of the resistance is. And with that being said, if you need an extra push, please feel free to reach out to Robert with his training and his coaching. And I know he is definitely the great resource to get you to where you want to be. Guys, I thank you for making it to the end of the episode. If you got value from this, it would mean the world if you could share it with a friend or someone who you also think will get value. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button to get our new episodes each and every single week. And if you'd like to support the podcast monetarily, you can do so for as little as $1 a month through our Patreon page. That link is also in the show notes. And as we always say at the end of the episode, guys, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without a little pain. Let's grow. The No Rain, No Rainbows podcast is recorded at Camaraderie, a collective workspace in Greenville, South Carolina, right off the Swamp Rabbit Trail. If you're looking for a place to grow your business, network with other professionals, and establish your own workspace, Camaraderie is the place to do so.